On the agenda for tonight's live analysis, we're going back to 1974. We're going to be taking a look at Buddy Guy with Junior Wells, and they're going to be performing 10 years ago. Hello, Phil here from Wings of Pegasus, and welcome to another live analysis video. If you do enjoy this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thank you guys for joining me on this one, and the room is very echoey tonight because I'm moving everything out in order to get a carpet fitted in here. So if people say take the reverb off your voice or off the guitar, there isn't any reverb, it's just the natural sound of the room. And thankfully, this is going to be a little bit better in the coming weeks, but for tonight, we're just going to have to deal with it. So, thank you everyone in that chat room for joining me, and the moderators as well for doing such a great job. We are going to be jumping into this one. It is a long performance video, so we'll have a look through, try and get through all of it, break it down as we normally do, and I'm going to be cutting this live analysis off at about half an hour because I've got lots of things to dismantle in here and get out of this room. So we will be getting Buddy Guy up on screen, and he's with Junior Wells performing, and this is coming from 1974, as I just said in the intro. So hopefully it's all working on the screen, you can see this. Let's get the guys up on screen and see how they get on.
Just 10 years ago, people, what I would do, no one would never know. Just 10 years ago, people, I would live my life, no one would never know. The things that I think I would do, ooh, no one will never know. I sit down in my dark room sometimes, tears strolling down from my eyes. I sit down in my dark room, tears strolling down from my eyes. You know, I begin to wonder, ooh, what makes a man like for me cry?
I'm just going to jump in here. As always, there's going to be a link to this performance video in the description below, so you guys can click on that link to watch it without me interrupting it. But there is so much in here from the band, and each performer really holding back to the point where you can hardly hear any of the rhythm in the background. Obviously we've got the bass in there, but it is so held back. There's definitely no pushing of any tempo going on here. If anything, it's just being taken out of the performance all the time. And the lead work that's on show the great thing about Buddy Guy and the way that he plays is the way that he leaves so many spaces, but also changes his tone on his guitar in order to keep it really clean, but then he'll just open up the volume and play with a little bit more, I say distortion, but this is back when the blues was so clean. Even the dirty sounds were really clean by today's standards. So the technique had to be spot on the whole time. And when we're starting to look at the lead guitar, the vibrato, something that I always mention, I will get the guitar out. Probably we'll jump into the video again and then I'll get the guitar out to demonstrate a few things, because I do want to put the spotlight on Buddy Guy's vocal, because his vocal is so good. And it's something that people might not necessarily appreciate, or they take their eye off the ball because of the guitar work that's going on and the amount of dynamic control in the guitar playing as well. And certainly Buddy Guy is one of those guys that really did inspire so many other players and so many future players, and Eric Clapton being one of those. And when he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Eric Clapton said that he remembered seeing Buddy Guy live back in the 60s and was so inspired by him, and in that particular performance he was playing with his teeth. And you may or may not know that Jimi Hendrix was massively influenced by Buddy Guy as well. So people focused on his guitar playing because it was so good and just playing the blues the way he does. But his voice is so expressive as well. And I'm going to try and get up on screen the piano so you guys can see the range that's being hit by Buddy in this performance. But hopefully it's showing up on the screen now, and hopefully you can see the arrow on screen as well, because I'm around high C here, which is the C5. You might be able to see me moving it there. If you're looking for this on your guitars and you've got your guitars out, it's going to be on the 8th fret of your guitar. You can count that out. That's where C5 is. But on the piano here, you can see the ranges that I've written down on here, because when we get up to C5, vocally, this is really high up there for any guy generally, and the C5 is seen as the holy grail in classical music. I always refer to it as that for classical singers, and hitting that in chest voice. Buddy Guy gets such a great rasp to his voice, and he just sounds like he's belting it right up there. It's C5. He actually goes higher. And by the way, if you don't know anything about piano, the white keys are going to be your letters, so you can see the C5 here. But if we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then we start again, it only goes up to G in music, and then you start again on an A. And the black keys are what are known as sharps and flats, and that's all the black keys are. And say for example, we are going for C here. I'm hoping that you can see this and it doesn't take away my marker, otherwise it'll be totally pointless. But if you can see the C5 here, you can see it's got a black key next to it, so that means that there's a sharp, so it'll be C sharp, and that's all that means. So any black key. You can also go down if you want to, say for example where I started before, when I've got my A here, if I go down one, that's now an A flat. And you might be thinking, well, before that was a G. So what does that make that? It's a G sharp. So when you go up, it's exactly the same note, the A flat and the G sharp. We don't want to get into too much of all of this, but just to let you guys know that around this kind of area, you can see A4, which is the A that I was just referring to. This is up there in the male tenor range. You can see the tenor range. It doesn't stop at A4, but that's where it's classed as getting high up, and the countertenor range goes even higher for guys. And this is where Buddy is pushing up into. He's not only getting a C5, he's also getting the D5, and I think he does get as far as the E5, and maybe even a little bit higher than that, but I'm not sure in this performance. But he gets way up there, considering that most guys are really maxing out probably at A4. So this is why when you're listening to a guy with this kind of emotion in his voice, then other guys might try to sing this and then realize, hang on, I can't get anywhere near these notes. So let me get rid of this so you can actually see my face again. So when you put all of that in with the guitar playing, it's something that was so unique to have that vocal ability at that level, hitting these crazy notes with such control, but also emotion, belting them out, and then going off into a lead guitar solo that was just top quality as well. And this is also why when you do hear a lot of compositions that are blues, and back in the 60s and the 70s, they would be in the key of A or B, because it means that the vocal is then a tone lower. It means the notes are going to be 2 notes lower than what Buddy's hitting here. So it makes it a little bit more accessible. So the fact that we're in D here, by the way, so just singing that D is way up there. Again, 10th fret of your high E string. So massively impressive from a vocal standpoint. And like I said, we will get the guitar out in a second. This is a long performance, so we will jump into it again, but I just wanted to put a little bit of a spotlight on his vocal because it's something that obviously a lot of people won't be focusing on, but just that range that he has to get way up there and put all the emotion into it as well is just a standalone vocal, considering how good he is at playing the guitar as well. But let's get back into it. I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to grab the guitar because there was so much in there and there's some really cool lines going on from Buddy. And just by the way, like I said, we're going to be in D here. So the thing to look out for is the way that we've got this control on Buddy's volume and the way that he just rolls it on and then rolls it off. And especially here, when we get into this solo part, we're going to be very much open, just on 10 on the volume. But then right at the beginning, when we've got the intro part, it's so understated. There's like that, and also the vibrato, which is something that is quite fast and just has a little bit of that angst in there as well. And it just puts across so much with the emotion, but just communicating something, communicating a feeling through the guitar. And you can tell the way that Buddy gets into his playing that he's just communicating through that guitar. And one of the lines that we had right at the end there, when we went into our, and from the rhythm we had this, a really cool little line. And then back into, that kind of thing, just throwing these lines together that just take it to somewhere slightly different than you were expecting, but still great control. And just talking from a rhythm point of view as well, because it's not as if in this performance we've got our any real strumming or rhythm going on. It is pretty much at that level that I just played. When you're rolling off the volume, you can just find that sweet spot in your volume to get a little bit of the chord coming out, but there's and even then, when you're listening out for the rhythm here, there's so much discipline across the whole band, because nobody's trying to get their instrument louder than everybody else. If anything, they're all just holding back, allowing the lead instrument to shine, whether that's the lead vocal or the harmonica or the lead guitar. Everybody knows to sit in the background because it's all about that lead voice, especially when you've got Buddy singing that lead vocal and then you've got Junior just giving a little response with a harmonica. So it is so controlled. It's top blues playing here, and you need that discipline across the whole band, but also the understanding that you're all playing and all aiming for the same goal. It's all about the music, it's all about the expression, and that's definitely what we get here. So from a rhythm perspective, it's really quiet in order to hear it, but when we are playing through, you can have your D7th up here on the 10th fret if you want to. You could move it down to the 5th fret. Then we can go into your G7th, and you don't really hear this in the performance because it is so light. You're more likely just going to hear that kind of thing, really subtle, because you're listening to the lead instrument. It's just keeping things moving along in the background. Then you go to your A7th. You can do your little semitone run down there if you want to. And just to throw in there, I think you can hear a little bit of 6th action going on as well. It's the chord that I threw in. That's 6th there, which is a G6th chord, and you might hear same thing back into the D7th. And if you want to continue that on, fast forward by a few bars, you can throw in that A6th as well. And now that really deliberate slide down, I think I heard that at some point before I stopped the video, but really subtle. This is the point, that you're listening out for these tiny little details, and it's so cool when they are thrown in there. And back into our... and then we're ready for the turnaround and we start all over again. So when we now get into the lead with Buddy, he spent a fair amount of time with that volume just taken off, but he then leaves himself somewhere to go. So the first note that he hits, when we get into this lead section, you can hear the crowd, they cheer because of that dynamic change, and they cheer because it affects you emotionally, because you haven't heard it at this level before. And that's what it's all about, taking people on a journey to the point where you get to your main lead part and you've upped it a level. Everything's now a little bit more open dynamically. The band are leaning into it as well, so that all of these and we've got all of that really cool stuff at the top, where we've got a little bit of a pre-bend going in. There's so much control and technique in here, because with the clean tones, I mean, mine's probably dirtier than Buddy's tone, even though it's pretty much as clean as I'm going to be able to get it through the amp that I'm going through, but there's still actually quite a fair bit on there, so it's still rolling off that volume. And all these lines. Just a little that. There's so much that you can do with the pre-bend, and when you're listening to someone like Buddy, there's so much that he does with techniques that just take it to a totally different place emotionally. You'll hear one line, he can play the same line again, but he'll do something slightly different with it, with that. Just putting in a double pick. But yeah, these are real details that I think guitar players look out for, and they really appreciate the dynamic ability just with the guitar and the control, but also just the way that Buddy throws the blues together. But let's get back into it, and we'll try and watch it all the way to the end, and I'll point out a few more things when we get there. So let me just point that out. He's hitting that C5 that I mentioned earlier, just at the beginning of this new verse. So it gives you an idea of that range. I just wanted to point out where he is, and that's that C5 that I demonstrated earlier. And there we have it. Something that I love about this performance is just the way that Junior Wells is just getting into it, even though he's not playing, but he's got his eyes closed and he's just taking this all in, and Buddy's playing as well. But you see the way that Buddy, with his lead work, started to... and started to move his way up to... and is really navigating up through the fretboard, and that, you know, taking your notes so much higher is then taking people to a place that they haven't been before. Again, you can say that about dynamics and the way that you start to open things up as the track progresses, but you can talk in terms of pitch as well, just spending a little bit more time higher up the guitar, and most of it is going... was all down, you know, 10th fret, 12th fret, but then getting towards... you're just taking it up higher. And just to throw this in, listen out for the way that Buddy Guy picks 2 or 3 or 4 times on one note. So many players spend just a pick per note and change all over the place and try and fit in as many notes as possible in a particular bar. But with Buddy Guy, he's got that approach of that kind of thing where he's picking to put more emphasis on that particular note because that's just the way that he's feeling at the time, and he's very much navigating his way through all of the notes with his emotions rather than just playing a set line that he would have rehearsed before. And this is the great thing about the blues, that you can play with a band like this for what? 9 minutes. It's probably a little bit less than that because there is an intro where Buddy talks to the crowd, but you can have a performance that goes on for so long. Everyone takes turns in having their voice at the front of the stage, whether that be the harmonica or lead guitar here or a vocal, but then you've got so much in there from Buddy that he's thrown together in terms of that overall journey. And it's great to listen to. I mean, from a guitar player's perspective, you can take so much from this because he's not thrown together something that he's learned before. And this is my overall point about the blues performances like this that do go on for a very long time, is it's not a set amount of runs and licks and lines that guys have rehearsed and then they play it live. It's just finding your way in front of an audience, and the great players do that, and they can always come up with something that is interesting to listen to and interesting all the time, rather than having a point at which you might lose a little bit of interest or you've already heard the same line. They might have that, and after you've heard it 3 or 4 or 5 times, you then realize that the guitarist just has a set amount of runs and licks, and now they've run out and they're struggling to find anything. The top blues players can just keep on making up lines all the time, and that's what Buddy Guy does. And this is why when you watch the great players, they will always give you a unique performance every time, because they're not playing the same lines. They're just mixing it up and going where they feel like going at that particular time. So it's great as a guitar player to watch this kind of thing, and that's, I mean, the reason why he's so well respected and inspired so many people as well. I know that Jeff Beck's one of the names that was in there as well. I mentioned Eric Clapton, Stevie Ray Vaughan as well. Just mammoth players who look up to Buddy Guy and looked up to him. And Buddy's still around, and unfortunately with COVID, it's something where he can't get out and play, but he has been playing as recently as before COVID then started. So Buddy Guy is still laying down lines, inspiring people. And just to mention quickly about the fact that when he signed to Chess Records in the late 50s, we're talking about 1957, around that kind of time, 1958. he was, wanting to put out music like everybody did, but he was mostly just playing as a session guy for other artists, and he played behind loads of very popular artists at the time, but he wanted to put out his own album, and it was Leonard Chess, who owned Chess Records, who referred to Buddy's playing as just a lot of noise, or just making noise, or something like that. And you fear that, or you certainly feel that Buddy was up against it, where the founder of the record label that he was signed to saw him as someone who was just making noise. But I don't understand how you can have that opinion when you're listening to this guy sing as well. Just such a quality vocal. So anyway, it wasn't until a lot later, almost 10 years, 1967, that he released his one and only album on Chess Records. And then getting into the 80s and the 90s, that's where Buddy got a little bit more attention, and I'm sure other players spent a little bit of time pointing people in the direction of Buddy Guy, because they were inspired by him, even though Buddy wasn't a household name. And it wasn't until the 80s and 90s and early 90s that Buddy started getting a lot of exposure. Eric Clapton invited him along to play at 24 Nights, and that was at the Royal Albert Hall. We're talking about 1990, 1991, so very early 90s, when Buddy Guy then released his 1991 album, Damn Right, I Got the Blues, and that could be seen as his mainstream breakthrough, I guess. And it's amazing that so many years after the fact, when we're looking at him play here in 1974, he's one of those guys that just played the clubs and got out there. Just to put it in perspective, when I mentioned about his album in 1967, he was still working at that point. He was still driving or delivering. I think it was a truck driver, towing trucks or something like that. So even when he had his first album released, he was still working and then playing the clubs in the evening. So you can see from this video, just an old school player, somebody that got out there, just gigged and just played the blues like nobody else. But I am going to have to call this video to a halt, and hopefully you guys have got a little bit out of this video. If you have got your guitars out, just have a little play around with that minor pentatonic shape 1, but also the blues scale. So when we're throwing in this, you want to be just bending up to that blues scale note that we've got in. All you need to do is just add one note to your minor pentatonic. Just like that, just have a play through that, but listen out for the way that Buddy uses it, how he ascends, how he descends, how he even goes down to... Throwing in the bend in that extended pentatonic shape down at the bottom as well, navigating his way from bottom to mid to top when we're talking about the fretboard. As just a journey, he's working his way the whole way through it, to the point where you get the crescendo at the end of his lead playing. He's right up there, just pushing his frets to the max, and is playing to the max as well. But it is so clean and such great technique, considering really in the 60s and 70s blues was so clean, and you just got top players who could emote so well through their instrument. But anyway, thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and I do these on Wednesday nights. If you haven't seen a live analysis before, then 12 midnight Greenwich Mean Time, that's when you can join in if you want to watch it live. It's always going to be available after the fact as well if you want to watch it on catch up. But thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and I'll see you guys at the next live stream and the next live analysis, and the next one of these, which will be next Wednesday at 12 midnight Greenwich Mean Time. You'll have to work out your time zone in order to make it live. But thank you guys so much for joining me tonight, and everyone in there, Brianna's in there, and Lucy and Donna and Orlando as well. Thank you so much for joining me on these, and I will see you guys at the next one. Have a fantastic evening, and if you did like this video, please give it a thumbs up and maybe consider subscribing to the channel, and I'll see you guys at the next one. Rock!